Hello, I'm Jeanne Yates, true crime author and criminologist. This is Best True Crime. Every episode, I take you on a journey to explore crime, forensics, and investigations. Hey, everybody, I'm Jeanne Yates, true crime author and criminologist, and this is Best True Crime. We bring true crime to you on your screen on YouTube, and do us a favor, hit like, hit subscribe, and you might be the winner of some amazing, fabulous prizes. So today we're going to talk about crime survivors. And with me is Jeannie Dotz-Barkowski. She is a crime survivor. She has an amazing story, and we need your help. So good morning, good afternoon. Hello, Jeannie.
Hey Judith, how are you today?
I am working like a dog. I just did a week-long seminar for homicide investigators, and I forgot cops like to eat, have drinks, and go to seminars, and then we turn around and we go eat. So I think I gained like several pounds, but can't drink because of migraines. But it was a lot of fun,
Mm.
very, very informative. So, all right,
And
first of all,
Turkey Day is tomorrow, so you get to
oh,
eat more.
I know. I think that's going to be boom chicka pop on the couch with some good movies, or I could clean my office, one or the other. So, all right, tell us about you and tell us about what happened to you and why you were a crime survivor.
Well, like every other person who has a loved one who was murdered, you get thrown into the criminal justice system kicking and screaming. And on February 3rd, 1995, that's when everything started. And my parents went out to dinner. It was supposed to snow, but it didn't. They had cabin fever, so they went out to dinner. And when they came home that night, they surprised two armed intruders. My father was shot 5 times, my mother 7, including a shot directly to her forehead less than 7 inches away. And even as my father had been shot and was laying on the floor, they took his wallet out of his pants. The next morning, my husband went over to their house. My mom and dad and my husband, Bry, had a business together, and there was something over there he needed. So he went over and he pulled up to the driveway, and he saw the drapes to the living room were still closed, and the newspaper was still in the paper box. And he thought to himself, well, that's strange. They must have been out really late last night. So he goes in and he gets the whatever it was he needed, and he goes into the kitchen and he sees Honey Bear, their collie. So he pet on her a minute, and then he left. And he went and did his rest of his Saturday afternoon, some of his Saturday, morning, afternoon errands. So anyway, he got home, and he'd been home a little while, and he comes and looks at me. I was working on the computer at home for some stuff for work, and he says, I forgot something. I got to go back to your parents' house, and I may take a while. I said, okay, no problem. And I just went back to what I was doing. Well, I lost track of time because I was knee deep into whatever it was I was working on for work. And all of a sudden, it's a little after 6 o'clock, and I look at the clock and I go, oh, I need to figure out something for dinner. And just as I was shutting my computer down, and I headed to the bathroom. And I could hear Bry comes in and goes, hey, where are you? I said, I'm in the bathroom. He goes, well, I need for you to come out here. I'm like, well, just a minute. And so I come out, and he's standing there, and behind him is our neighbor, Linda, and a sheriff's officer. My first thought was, oh my God, something has happened to Paul and the kids. But then I realized the way Linda was looking at me, something was terribly wrong, but it wasn't Linda's husband and children. And that's when I realized my husband was shaking from head to toe. And he walked over and sat on the edge of the couch. And Linda came farther into the kitchen, and the officer came over. And I'm just kind of standing there. I'm like, what? Somebody tell me something. And my husband took my hands. And at this point, there are tears just streaming down his face. And he takes my hands. He says, your parents are dead. And I just looked at him and I said, no. And he nods. He goes, yes, yes, they are. And I said, no. And at that point, he can't even speak. And and I go, why? How? What? And he just couldn't get it out. He looked over at the officer, and the officer says they were killed. And I said, killed? I said, was it an accident? Was it a drunk driver? And he says, no, it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. They were murdered. And I stood there for about half a second, just frozen. And then I just started walking around our family room in a loop going, no, 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 no. And I remember it. It's very, very kind of weird how I remember it. It's like I could feel myself walking around the room, but felt like I was watching from like maybe across the room. And my husband said something to the officer that I didn't quite catch, but I did say heard their officer say, she's in shock. So a couple of minutes passed and I finally quit my wandering and I came over and I'm just shocked. It's like at all at the same time, every single brain cell I have has either shut down or it's on full tilt go at the same time. I cannot think straight to save my life.
Let me ask you this. A lot of writers will say that they felt like they were watching a movie or they couldn't comprehend it was real. Um, what's your experience? Did you were you still in disbelief? Did you hear yourself speaking?
As I remember, as I said, I can remember my little travels around the room. I can remember those those few minutes very clearly, but from a weird perspective. And I was definitely in denial. And then all of a sudden I went, what about Honey Bear? Is Honey Bear okay? Honey Bear was their big girl collie. She was a rescue. She'd been taken away from her first owners when she was about 4.5, 5 months old from our wonderful Concord Veterinary Clinic. And my parents adopted her, not knowing if the medical treatment was going to save her life or not. They said if they were going to do everything they could to get her healthy, happy, and strong, but if they couldn't, she was going to have, whatever time she had left, she was going to have so much love she wouldn't know what to do with it. Not only did she survive, but she thrived. She was 84-pound female collie, which is big for a collie. She had a gorgeous coat and was just one of the sweetest dogs. I mean, she was silly. She was goofy. And my parents absolutely adored her. And I loved her dearly. And my husband and I also had a collie, Mischief Marie, that they were best buds. So all of a sudden when Where's Honey Bear, Is She Okay? Hit, my first thought was, I have to go get her. I need her. I want her right now. And of course, I would have at that point in time no business behind the wheel of a car, but you're not thinking rationally. There's nothing logical, practical, rational, any way, form, or fashion. So the officer said, she's in the back of a nice, one of the cruisers, and a nice warm police cruiser. I will go get her for you. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Meanwhile, our neighbor is still there, Linda, and she's saying, okay. She goes and gets me and brought both some water, and you can tell she's not going to leave anytime soon. She's going to watch out. So we just stood there for a couple of minutes, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I've got to call my boss in Atlanta and tell her I'm not going to be in work Monday. I've got to call the girl that works for me. I'm not going to, it's like I'm numb, but I realize at the same time, I've got all this stuff I have to do. Well, right about then, our phone starts ringing. And a couple minutes later, there's knocks at the door because an unethical TV reporter decided she wanted the scoop. And when Sheriff Hutchison was standing outside my parents' home giving a briefing, he specifically told every person standing there, the family has not been informed. So do not release their names. And this woman goes, well, can you at least confirm that Les and Carol Dotts were murdered in their Village Green home last night? Live on air.
So in other words, she was the announcer of their horrific murders.
Right. Anybody who was watching that particular TV station at that time, a little after 6, on Saturday, February 4th, knew before I did my parents had been murdered. Now, fortunately, we had unlisted telephone number, so the press was not able to immediately find us. But friends and neighbors, people who cared about us, they hear it. And of course, some of them start calling, coming over. And the shock goes from one kind of shock to another kind of shock. Like, there's all these people in my house. What am I supposed to do? And Brian and I kind of went into automatic be good host and hostess, mode. Our neighbor Linda was screening phone calls. If they could come over, they would talk to me, this, that, and the other. And I had to make a couple of quick phone calls in between them, about letting my boss know when going to be in that coming Monday and so forth. And I can remember a friend of mine came in and she said, I looked kind of wobbly. So she made me go sit down on the couch. And she said, she was talking to me. And she said, she looked at me and she said, it looked like me. It sounded like me. She said, but my eyes, she says, you looked into my eyes. I wasn't there.
Sure.
The Jeannie that she had known for years wasn't there.
Judy, where did this take place? City, state, it's up to you on how to announce that.
Knoxville, Tennessee, in the west part of the county, in the Village Green subdivision. Nice neighborhood, nice people. And apparently, David Leon Scarborough, Thomas Gagne Jr., and Harley Watts had gone through the neighborhood that night and were ringing doorbells to see who was home. And my parents always, whenever they went out, they left a light in several different places to make it look like somebody was home. Plus, we're the type of pet parents that cats do not run loose. They are not left outside in the cold and the heat. They are house babies. So Honey Bear was inside. So when they rang the doorbell and they heard this big dog, because she had a deep bark, barking, they still went ahead and came around back and broke in. And fortunately, they didn't, I think they shot at her and missed, or kicked her, because her one side was very tender for several days. And she made, when they shot at her, she may have run into the wall and bounced off of it.
How old were your parents?
Pardon?
How old were your parents at the time?
My dad had turned 69 the previous October. My mother had turned 67, but nobody would have believed they were in their 60s. Everybody thought they were in their early 50s. My dad still worked full-time, and my mom worked part-time for him. They had a very active social life. They both did volunteer work. They spoiled their furry grandchildren rotten. They were just very happy people who loved life, loved their friends, loved their families. Just, life was good at that point in time. It was really good for all of us.
So you have two folks that are still working, care about their families, their animals, are volunteering, just good salt of the earth people, not anybody famous or rich or just good salt of
Oh
the earth.
no.
Tell me about growing up. Tell me about your parents. Who were they?
Oh, two of the funniest people I've ever known in my life, for one thing. Um, I love their senses of humor. I mean, it would just, you would have to, you have to be around them to see, just, you could tell the look come into their eye when one of them was going to do something. Daddy and I used to like to gang up on my mom sometimes. She hated the word tinkle. I do not know why, but she absolutely loathed and despised that. So Daddy and I would get silly when I was a kid. We'd hold hands and skip through the house. Instead of singing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, we would sing Tinkle, Tinkle, Little Star and drive my mother up a wall. Um, they were the kind of parents that my dad would be, it was an unusual Saturday or Sunday afternoon to see him on the front porch with me and my friends playing Barbie doll or Little Kittles. And that was unusual back in the 60s. Both of my parents were active in, like, when I was a Girl Scout and so forth. We, have a camping trip or a hiking trip, and my dad would be driving me, and he was the only dad that ever did in our trip. And my mom was one of those people that she just was very proper in some respects, but they can really let her hair down in others. And she was not easily flustered. I have a one memory that I just chuckle really hard when I think about it. We had this little, teeny tiny cabin up on Anglers Cove on Wattsburg Lake on the side of Roan Mountain. And we had this little flat bottom boat with a half power horse motor that our collie and Sheltie used to like to ride around in with us. So Daddy and I and the Sheltie and collie were out there. My mom was sitting out in front of the cabin, and she was reading and she dozed off. And she felt a nudge on her shoulder. Well, next door was a cattle farm. When I say by next door, like 2 acres away was a cattle farm. Well, some of the fencing had come down, and a baby calf came over and laid its head on my mom's shoulder. And she opened, she turns her head and opens her eyes to this big old calf face in her face. She didn't scream. She didn't jump up and yell like a lot of people would. She was like, she just turned and said, "I do believe you're lost." Because Daddy and I were come in, and we were getting ready to come up the hill. And she's sitting there petting its nose and just talking to it like it's the most perfectly normal thing in the world to have a cow come up and stick its face in yours. Just
Probably
no big deal.
that she loved animals.
Oh, she did. Well, when my parents adopted Honey Bear, she was so sick, so weak. Had been, no, it was a special place in hell for people who abuse animals and children. I stopped by on the way home from work one day, and I could hear my father going, "Grr, grr." I'm like, what on earth is he doing now? So I go in through the kitchen to the door that walked into the living room, to the family room. He is on his hands and knees in front of Honey Bear with a rope tug toy. One end is in his mouth, and he's putting the other end in her mouth, trying to teach her how to play. Wow. Which, trust me, she caught on fast. That is one of my most favorite, treasured memories. To see this grown man on the floor, hands and knees, teaching this puppy who almost did not live, who had been so badly abused and neglected, how to play. I To the day whenever I think about it, I still, because I got a little teary that day when it happened, and I still do, but it's one of those warm, fuzzy, happy tearies.
Sure.
And that's one of my most very favorite memories of my dad, period. And the cow thing is one of the favorites of my mom. So, but my house when I was, growing up and a teenager in high school and stuff, our house was the house that my friends came to constantly. Their parents knew it was safe for their kids to be there because they weren't going to be there unless my parents were there. But my friends loved my parents. If my parents weren't going to be there, they were like, "We can't come in, right?" I said, "Yeah." "Well, when are they going to be back? We want to see them." And I'm like, "What about me?" And there were times, Mom, like I'd be out with some other friends or on a date or something, and some of my friends would come knock on the door because I actually had more guy friends than girl friends when I was in high school. And they go, "Well, she's not here. Well, no time. I'm not. She's not going to be back till late." They go, "That's okay. We'll come hang out with you." And Mom and Dad were funny. They said, as flattered as they were, and as much as they loved these kids, she said, "Sometimes we would just like to have a Saturday evening at home by ourselves." But they were never going to turn them away. Never.
So you said life was going really good February 95. She was working full time. She was working part time. They had a good social life, a good relationship, loved their family, animal lovers. Let's move into the actual crime on February 3rd, 1995, and what you have learned from the court system, the records.
Well, like I said, they shot both of my parents multiple times. And although their deaths were fairly quick, they were not instantaneous. When they shot my dad in the back and also in the back of the neck, the bullets, one or two of the bullets ricocheted off bone and those did not hit internal organs just yet. And apparently bones have like 1,000 more nerve endings than muscles or internal organs. So he definitely did not have a painless death. And I have to figure, even though my mother had been shot several times from across the room, that she was still alive, although the coroner said it wouldn't have been for long. That they felt like the need to walk across that room, hold the gun up to her head, and pull the trigger. And then steal the cordless phone set on the end table that was next to her.
Do you think they interrupted?
Oh, definitely, because they said they'd gone out to dinner and came home. There were quite a few things stolen. I say fortunately, I'd rather they'd taken everything out of the house except Honey Bear and left my parents alone. But they, most of what they got was stuff you might be able to sell at a flea market. I mean,
what sort of items did they take?
I'd really rather not say, since we're dealing with a parole hearing there now, and he's now trying to claim he's innocent and blaming it on somebody else. It's a big, long, convoluted story.
Okay.
But let me just say it. Nobody should ever have to die because somebody's too lazy and stupid to get a job, and all they want to do is sit around and get stoned and then go steal things so they can get stoned some more.
So it wasn't anything like exotic oil paintings or fur coats or electronics?
No, my parents, not hardly. My dad's biggest extravagance was he played golf. My mom's biggest extravagance is she got her hair done once a week. They made a decent living, but they worked hard. They had a nice house, but they worked hard. They earned everything they have.
Now, going through the process, did they plea bargain? Did you have to sit through the trial? Were they all tried at once?
Oh, well, first of all, I no longer refer to it as the criminal justice system. I call it the criminal lack of justice system. A speedy trial is only guaranteed for the criminal. It's not guaranteed for the victims at all. I cannot tell you how many motions hearings we showed up for that had gotten postponed because the defense wanted something, or, you know, they had a hangnail or something. And we'd have to miss work. We'd have to go back. And then show up again. Oh, it's been postponed. Have to go, But the week from when my husband found their bodies, they apparently picked up Gagne and Scarborough on suspicion. They just had a feeling that they were involved, the sheriff's department, and opened up. We had a little communication problem with the sheriff's department at first, but it got alleviated and taken care of very quickly. And we opened up the paper, Sunday paper, and there's an article with these two people's pictures in there that have been arrested as persons of interest in my parents' murders.
Before you knew about it.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. Are we going to be the last, because here, Knox County knew my parents had been murdered before I did because of an unethical journalist. And so, that first week, I can truly say was hell. Absolute, unadulterated hell.
The first week after they were deceased.
Yeah. When everybody finally left that Saturday night, and all of a sudden the house was empty. It was about 11:15, 11:30. And we just sat there staring at each other. We're like, what do we do now? I mean, we couldn't think, we couldn't move. And all of a sudden we see headlights coming up the driveway at a very high rate of speed. And Brian looked at me and goes, oh God, the press has found us. And I got up and stood up, and all of a sudden, I looked out the living room window, and I could see a friend of mine. I didn't know Tracy could move that fast. And she goes, and I'm up to almost to the front door, and I hear her banging on it. And I open the door, and she just runs in, and she envelops me in a bear hug, and she is sobbing her eyes out. She was home. Her mom was visiting her, and her little boy was asleep in bed, and she flipped on the TV for the news, for the 11 o'clock news, and she saw it. And she looked at her, I'd met her mom a few times, and she said, Mom, you need to watch her son. I'm going to Junior Brides. They're going to need me. So she came over and just basically sat there and talked to us. Of course, we'd had a whole bunch of people in the house, and, we had been, so we'd gone to hostess mode. So there were, drinks and food and stuff that we needed cleaned up. So she's cleaning all that up, and she's checking on us every 5 minutes. And finally, a little bit after 1 o'clock, I told her, I said, you need to get home. I said, we need to get to bed. She goes, are you sure I can stay here tonight? I'm like, that's really sweet of you, but no, go ahead, go home. So anyway, she goes home. I go back, I go get a shower. And I start to crawl in bed, and Bri starts to crawl in bed. And I just looked at him and I said, I'm going to the house. And I started to jump out of bed. I don't know if I was planning on going in my pajamas or what, but I was getting ready to hit out that door. And Bri grabs me. He says, no, you're not. I said, yes, I am. He goes, no, you don't need to see that. And I said, I want to go. And my husband is 7 feet tall. I am 5'2" and 7/8. So he got me on the bed. He literally laid down on top of me while I am kicking and screaming and calling him every name in the book, plus I think I created a few new ones. And then I started crying. Neither one of it, I had not cried yet. And I was sobbing. And I never really understood what the term wail meant, or wailing when someone is grieving, until I could hear myself doing it. Now, our backdoor neighbors had 4 dogs, little dogs. And there was Moses, there was Precious, there was Lacey, and there was Sally Jessie. Sally Jessie was named after Sally Jessie Raviel because she would never shut up, according to Bill, her owner. Sally Jessie was my favorite. I just love that little dog to death. So anyway, I'm crying, and back in the back of my mind, I'm aware that they're barking, but, you know, just only peripherally. And all of a sudden, I can hear Bill telling Sally Jessie to shut up because she's gonna bother Bri and Jeanne. I started laughing. Bri started laughing. And we just, it's what brought me back to sanity. You know, and Bri was thinking to himself, am I going to have to lay here on top of her the rest of the night? Right before that happened. So we calmed down, and Bri then informed me under no circumstances were I to see my parents' bodies. That he forbid me from going over there or seeing the bodies. That's the only time in all the years we've been married he's ever told me, no, you will not do something. And I'm glad. I wouldn't have wanted to see it. I wish he hadn't had to see him.
What did the killers, there were 3, correct?
Yes. Thomas Paul Gagne Jr. was a few weeks from being 21. David Leon Scarborough was a few weeks from being 19. Harley Watts was a few weeks from being away from being 14. Now, something I definitely want to make a point about. Thomas Gagne Jr., while he was in high school, was arrested and convicted for 2 counts of aggravated assault as a juvenile. And apparently when he got to a certain point in the program, they moved him to a halfway house, which in with a couple of days he walked off. No one ever tried to find him. Now, he had been using and selling drugs since he was in middle school or younger because his father was a criminal. His father was into extortion, prostitution, drugs, I think guns, I can't swear to it. I mean, just a litany. He was like his own little mini mafia. And it's rumored that he even pimped out his own daughters.
What were they sentenced with? How many years did they get, and what was their sentence when all was said and done?
Well, the youngest one, he had started, Scarborough had started using and selling drugs with and for Gagne in middle school. Harley Watts was only 10 when he started selling and using drugs and stealing with Gagne. Because he was a minor, he wasn't quite 14. And honestly, even at 14 and a half, 15 years old, he still looked like he was 10. They made a plea bargain with him if he would agree to testify against Gagne and Scarborough, because he was in the car. He never actually made it inside the house.
The youngest one.
Yeah, but he was culpable. He was definitely culpable. So anyway, he got to go to a nicer juvenile facility with better educational facilities and athletic facilities and so forth. So anyway, his mother, when he was 13 years old, was letting him go hang out and run around with Gagne and Scarborough, who both were high school dropouts, didn't have jobs, but had money for cars, running around, and cigarettes. Now, what kind of decent parent would let their 13-year-old child run around with two young men who are 5.5, 6.5 years older than him, high school dropouts, no income, but they've got cash?
So these questions are all going through your mind through this whole ordeal, from start to finish.
Oh yeah, the more I found out about it, the deeper it got into it, I'm just like, what? It's like every time I spoke to the sheriff's office, they would tell me something new, and I'm like, is it ever going to stop? Who are these backcrap crazy people?
So let me ask you this.
And
Any kind of help while you were going through this, that professional help, or maybe organization?
oh yeah, definitely. Our family doctor recommended an excellent psychologist. Just thought he's passed, and so understanding. And even though he'd never been through anything like this, he seemed to know exactly what we needed, which was partly a sounding board. But most importantly, he was there to help us through our grieving process, so that we would do it in a healthy way and not a self-destructive way. And I think that is such an important thing to remember, because your anger can eat you alive. Your grief can eat you alive. And you're going to have moments of that no matter what, because it is everything surrounding having a loved one murder is nothing short of horrible. And that's not even a word that's even close enough to being able to describe it.
Have you forgiven?
It's like
have you forgiven the criminals?
Are you kidding? They have shown no remorse. They don't give a rat's ass about me or my family or what they did. Pardon my language. I almost forgave Harley Watts when he testified against David Scarborough. I thought, okay, this kid's really going to get his life turned around. But then he was given the opportunity to go on a furlough to his mother and his stepfathers, because they'd moved to Middle Tennessee, to get, so he could slowly get acclimated to going back, into regular society. Well, he went AWOL. And during that time, his grandmother bought him a car. Well, he was finally found, and he got sent to a different facility that wasn't nearly as nice and fun as the one he had been in. But still, they didn't prosecute his mother or his grandmother for aiding and abetting. And I was furious. But in that county, they refused to do it. So he's been out free and clear since December 1st, or sometime in December 2001. And guess what? Guess who's been arrested multiple times? Aggravated felony, aggravated robbery, aggravated this. I mean, he was given a wonderful second chance, and he blew it.
So we've still got two of the murderers in custody.
Yes. David Leon Scarborough, the one who's coming up for parole December 9th, and Thomas Gagne Jr., who He'll eventually come up for parole. I'm hoping later than sooner, much, much later, because he's pure evil.
So,
He is pure evil.
so your life has essentially become the protector of your
I
parents
mean,
and to keep these folks locked up.
yeah. I mean, it'll be 27 years in February. And, you know, I can remember the day that Scarborough got convicted. And we came home, and my husband was elated. And I was like, I'm glad, I'm relieved he was convicted. But there was something inside of me, I just thought, this is not over by a long shot. And we're going to have appeal hearings. There's going to be post-conviction hearings, which I had to testify at one. Of course, we didn't know that we had a bunch of idiots on the state Supreme Court in the early 2000s that were going to rearrange and change a case law that overturned over 1,000 murder convictions, and his was one of them. And we kept waiting to go to retrial and waiting to go to retrial. But because there were so many, there was so much backup. And also our judge was in ill health. So finally, Scarborough and his attorneys reached out to the prosecutor in the DA's office here in Knox County about a plea bargain. And they came to us, and we had to think about it, obviously. And the thought of not having to be, excuse me, let me sip water. The thought of having to sit in the same room, the same courtroom again, with him and his family, especially his lovely mother, who, as I was walking by one time, made the comment, well, if they didn't want their house broken into, they shouldn't have gone out to dinner.
They said that about your parents.
Yes, she did. She also made some announcements in their church about, I knew he was innocent, I just wanted someone to pay, and that I made the sheriff arrest him.
But that you knew.
Well, considering I never knew. Pardon?
So the mother of one of these people allegedly says you knew that they were innocent, but you just wanted someone to pay for the crime.
He was, yeah, she said, David Scarborough's mother said, I knew he was innocent, I just wanted someone to pay for the crime, which one of the most asinine things I could ever think of. But the thought of having to be in the same room with these people again, it was just like somebody reached inside me, grabbed several different internal organs and just started squeezing. So we agreed to the plea bargain. But part of the reason we agreed to the plea bargain is at the time we were not aware that in Tennessee, convicted felons, even violent felons, under the law at that time, got 2 for 1, which means for every 1 day they serve, they get 2 days off their sentence. And they can also earn goodie points, which means more time off their sentence. Now, they can rack up infractions and disciplinary actions. And in this case, like Scarborough, he's been caught stealing. He's been caught with illegal cell phone. He's refused direct orders. He goes and smokes in places he's not supposed to. He's been caught with drug paraphernalia. He has flunked multiple drug tests. He's been found with drugs. He's been caught selling drugs.
While incarcerated.
Incarcerated. Nothing happens to them. There's no time. They don't lose any of their goodie points. If we had known.
Prison? They're in the state system?
He's in Morgan County Correctional. Yeah, we thought that the earliest he could ever possibly come up for parole, this is in 2006, was 2026 or 2030. I mean, that would be like the super, super earliest. And that we didn't even think that was even possible. But we didn't know about the twofers. If we'd known about the twofers, we would have sucked it up and gone back to court, even though it would have probably meant me losing my job.
Where's the case now, Jeanne?
Besides in hell. Well, Scarborough is now up for parole again, December 9th. And he's all of a sudden he's claiming he's completed all these programs to make himself a better citizen that the prison has no record of. Now, to be fair, maybe he did it through some of the visiting churchy people. I don't know. He also now claims to have a daughter and 2 grandchildren. He claims he got this girl pregnant when he was 18. See, I got to know his ex-wife, now ex-wife, a little bit after she left his family, because her mother, stepfather, siblings, and grandmother were 100% on our side. They hated him. And Charity had told her mother that David and his parents were panicking because she wasn't getting pregnant. And she needed to be either a pretty young wife, pregnant, or a pretty young wife with a young baby in front of the judge, is what her mother-in-law told her. And she didn't want a baby yet. I think at that point, she was beginning to wonder just how legit her relationship was, but she was in love. And during the trial, I think she began to realize that she was being used. And the first time I got to meet Charity, her mom called, and it was actually her mom's birthday. And she goes, "I just got the best birthday present in the world." I said, "What was that?" She goes, "Charity's home." Wow. I burst into tears. I was so happy for her. She goes, "What are you all doing?" I said, "Well, let's just clean up the dinner dishes." She goes, "Charity wants to come over and talk to you." I said, "That's fine. Bring her over." They pull up in the driveway. I go out the front door and down the sidewalk. And Charity flew out of the car, wrapped her arms around me, and started bawling, crying, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "Honey, you've got nothing to be sorry about. You didn't do any of this. You are not responsible. You couldn't help you fell in love with the wrong person." And she goes, "I understand if you hate me." I'm like, "I don't hate you. I will never hate you." And, I was just, this poor thing was taking all this guilt from what her husband and his family dumped on her, I guess, for lack of a better term, for what he did, for the crimes he committed. So, my family wasn't the only family that suffered because of David Scarborough. She and her family suffered also because of his and his family's lies and their deceit and manipulation.
Now, you said that he is coming up for parole.
Mm-hmm. 2 weeks from tomorrow.
You've got a petition going on where people can sign to keep him doing time and staying in prison for the murder of these 2 people, Les and Carol Dotz. Tell me about, very quickly, tell me about the petition, and we're going to put a link up also on my social media and also Best True Crime Video here.
Great. You don't know how much I appreciate this. I created a petition on change.org. You can go one of 2 ways. You can go to the search tool and click on it and then type in "Justice for Carol," Carol, and Les, Les, Dotz, Dotts. Make sure you put 2 T's. It's like polka dots, but there's 2 T's. And make sure you get the 2021 petition, because the 2015 petition is still on there, even though it was declared victory. It just doesn't go away, I guess. Please read the petition thoroughly. I don't want somebody going in and blindly signing anything. I want you to know the facts. And the facts are in there, even though his family and friends, I don't know what's wrong with those people. Well, I know his parents and he has never told anyone the actual truth, not even his little sister. And of course, none of them were at the hearings or the trial. Has had one grandmother who's since passed away, who came for a short period of time, 2 days. And his sister was there right after the conviction came in. She was there when the sentencing came in from the jury. And then she was there for his plea bargain. But that was it. They didn't see the tape where he confessed. They didn't hear the testimony. They didn't hear about the guy he used to work with at U-Haul briefly, who said they were war storing and David was bragging about murdering my parents. And there was also another witness, his ex-brother-in-law, to that particular incident. And they tell me I need to be sued for slander, that I'm a liar, I don't know the facts, I need to quit picking on him, and that I must not have a heart. And they keep going on about he's a son, a grandson, a brother, blah, blah, blah. And now they're claiming he's a father and a grandfather. Well, and he's claiming he got Michelle pregnant when he was 18. If that's true, why wasn't ever that brought up at the trial, post-conviction hearing? His first parole hearing. Why did that come up out of the blue?
So we've got
and now
here and so many issues, and it's just been going since February 3rd, 1995, when they found your parents brutally murdered. We're going to put up again the information for the petition. I ask that everybody sign this and keep this individual behind bars. Jeannie, real quick.
Please share.
Yes, please share it. Jeannie, real quick, if your parents, if you could see them one more time, what would you say?
I love you. I miss you. I'm sorry.
Never apologize for your feelings. Never apologize.
Besides being my parents, they were my friends. I still go to pick up the phone to call my mom. There'll be a movie that Brian and I will watch on TV, that, through Netflix or something, and I still start to turn to him to say, hey, we need to tell them to watch this. And we've got 2 collies, 2 Shelties, 2 cats and a fish, all rescue. And they'll be doing something, and we'll look at each other, and your father would have spoiled so-and-so ridiculously. And then your mom would have really spoiled that one. And they're not, they're always going to be a part of us. They're always going to be a part of me. They're in my heart, they're in my head, they're in my memories. Even though these 3 pieces of trash ripped my life apart, even though they broke my heart into so many pieces, I was raised right. I was raised to stand up for the people you love, to do the right thing for the right reason. I will never do anything to dishonor or disrespect my parents and the life they led. They may think that they can intimidate me, but they can't, because I am stronger than them. I'm smarter than them. And it's always going to be that way. Because I have my parents. You can't see them, they can't see them, but they're right here. They're right here on either one of my shoulders at all times. And I wish I could touch them. I wish I could see them. I wish I could feel them. but I know they're there. And more importantly, I know their love is there. And that's a concept none of them will ever understand.
Jeannie, thank you so much. We're sending you love and light. We're sending your parents love and light. And folks, please sign this petition. Please keep this guy behind jail bars, behind prison bars. And thank you so much for sharing your story with us and helping.
Thank you for asking me to. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I thank you in advance to everyone who signs a petition. And go home and give everybody you love a hug, including your fur babies.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Best True Crime. I'm Judith A. Yates, and I hope you subscribe. Be sure to visit truecrimebook.net and be safe out there.